I recently watched the Ed Gein series on Netflix. I know there's a lot of controversy about it. I thought it was pretty good, and I thought it did some interesting things. I think there's a lot where it could have improved. I think it does some things a bit over the top, but it gave me a lot of food for thought in terms of book recommendations. And so if you've watched any of my shorts or you follow me on social media platforms, you'll know that I did a little series of videos recommending books. But when you're doing it in short form content, you can't really say very much. And so I thought I would turn it into a full-length video. And I'm also, just for an added bonus if you did watch those things, adding some extra book recommendations in here as well. I have my list of prompts and I will tell you about the books. So all of these prompts are themes that I felt came out of the show as we were going along. Whilst there are some books in here that approach the topics of death, serial killing, body horror, that is not what this is about. As I say, there are some that have those themes in them, but that's not what these prompts were designed for. Let's get into the list. Number one, the first prompt that I have is about the sort of controlling mother-son relationship that goes on between Ed Gein and his mother. And so the first story that I want to recommend is the titular story in The Albatross by Susan Hill. This is quite a long, I would say it's more like a short novella or a long short story rather than a short story. And in this, Duncan's life is very much controlled by his mother. They live by the sea. It has very sort of brooding, atmospheric scenery and environment to it. Things feel very claustrophobic and they get tighter and tighter. And eventually we see Duncan basically snap and do what he feels needs to be done. Very good story. My other recommendation for this is The Water Cure by Sophie McIntosh. Now this has three girls at its centre. We split between their narratives and they are living somewhere secluded away from the rest of humanity. We don't know what is beyond the borders of where they live, but there's a very oppressive nature to this that's been dominated by their parents. This has almost like a dystopian feel for it, a speculative what-if nature to it. I actually really want to read this again. I loved this when I read it. Highly recommend. Okay, prompt number two is a book whose narrator does not believe that they are the one perpetrating the crime, and my recommendation for you is The Night of the Mannequins by Stephen Graham Jones. This is a YA thriller and it reads very quickly. It's so gripping. And in this, our protagonist knows that there is a spate of murders going on and he believes that it is mannequins perpetrating the crime. Very good read. Highly recommend. For prompt number three, I have two recommendations. This is a book that makes you question what's really happening and what isn't. And the first one I've got is Rest and Be Thankful by Emma Glass. In this one, we follow a paediatric nurse who is working night shifts, and those night shifts are starting to play with her mind. She starts to see things, gruesome things. This is very disturbing, particularly as it follows a paediatric nurse, so dealing with babies and children, but it is such a good book. Really makes you think, makes you feel. It's horrifying, but also beautiful and poetic. I absolutely loved this. I have a second book for this prompt too. I think the book I've just read, Alias Grace, also quite fits this bill because we have the interspersal of real historic records, letters, court case notes, confessions and testimonials from different people who are involved, mixed with the historical fiction that Margaret Atwood has come up with about the character. And throughout, because of the perspectives that we have, you're forced to question, can we trust what Grace Marks, the lady who was accused of murder, is saying? Can we trust what she's saying? Is she just trying to make herself sound better? She comes across as very pious and very perfect and polite, but can we trust her testimony on that? What is she hoping to achieve with the person that she's speaking to in this way? And then also interspersed with a psychoanalyst. He doesn't give himself that title because it's when that title was not really used, but a man who is very interested in how the brain works and his weird thoughts and certain things that happen without him really realising that they're happening. So what's really happening, what isn't? I think that does appear in this book, and it's a really great book. I mean, it's Margaret Atwood, of course, it's great. So the next prompt is about gender fluid or gender questioning individuals written in a time when this was considered quite transgressive. And what I mean by that is, with this book recommendation, The Garden of Eden by Ernest Hemingway, when Ernest Hemingway was writing this book, those things were not considered normal. They were not considered okay, and yet he wrote this book. It was published posthumously, but in this we have a central couple who are on their honeymoon when the wife starts to do some odd things. And I think that's because at the time they didn't have the words to talk about what they were feeling. So she starts to try and dress like her husband. She wants them to be confused for siblings or for the same person, which the sort of incestual implications of that are weird today, but I think speaks volumes for the sorts of gender questioning that she was going through, obviously as a character rather than as an author. But yes, this is fantastic. I've never read any other Ernest Hemingway, so I can't really tell you if this is typical of his other works, but I do really highly recommend this one. And if you only ever read one Ernest Hemingway, read this one because I really love it. Okay, next prompt for a book about trying on other people's bodies. So in Ed Gein, he likes to try on their skin. In this, we are transferring consciousness. This is Body Tourist by Jane Rogers. This is a bit of a sci-fi future, but still set in quite a realistic England. I believe it's England, yeah. So in this, it's a bit less gruesome than what Ed Gein's doing, but I think the implications of trying on other people's bodies are still just as serious in this. Only a short one. In this, we're viewing the story through different people's perspectives. So sometimes it's the people whose consciousness are being swapped swapped, and sometimes it's the people whose bodies are being used for this sort of experimentation. Another great read. Okay, my next prompt is a depiction of schizophrenia from someone who has lived it. So this one is a bit of an odd recommendation. It's All Dogs Are Blue by Rodrigo de Souza Leal, translated by Zoe Perry and Stephen Tobler. I didn't really enjoy this, and I have to say when I first read it, I thought it was negatively stereotyping people with paranoid schizophrenia. What has changed my mind and why I feel very conflicted about this book is that afterwards I read the information around it and I came to realise that this was written by someone who suffered with paranoid schizophrenia and lived in institutions like the ones that are being described in this book. It's very short, but it's a very tough read. It's quite brutal and it's quite psychedelic, I would say. It's quite hallucinatory. So I'm recommending it here because I feel like the idea of own voices and the experience of schizophrenia from someone who's lived it is important, but I will say this is a tough read. Okay, next prompt is if you enjoyed the somewhat psychopathic nature of Adeline, Ed Gein's somewhat girlfriend in this, I highly recommend Deep Water by Patricia Highsmith. That's not necessarily because I think the characters in this are precisely like Adeline, but there is something about what happens between this couple, the toxic nature of their relationship and how they sort of escalate what's going on, the gruesome nature of their relationship, I feel like translates to how Adeline is. This is a bit of a thriller. The wife is unfaithful and her lover ends up murdered. The husband decides to punish his wife by suggesting that he was the one that committed the crime, and things turn into chaos from there. It's an excellent read. I had to stay up all night reading it, finishing it, because it was just so gripping. So now we have the body horror prompt. Okay, if you like that feeling of gruesomeness and horror that's going on, I have a couple of different recommendations for you. The first one is Sealed by Naomi Booth. This one is described as being a pre-apocalyptic novel about an illness that sweeps the world, and this was written before the pandemic, which is so surprising. But in this, with this illness, your orifices close up, your mouth, your nose, your eyes, and we're following a woman who is pregnant, and as you can imagine, orifices sealing up is not ideal when you're pregnant. I have never felt so tense reading a book as I did reading the end of this. I happened, unfortunately, to be reading it on a train, and I had to really try to control my body because there were so many people on this train. I didn't want them to think I was being incredibly weird. This is so good. I love Naomi Booth's writing. I highly recommend this book, but only if you can handle the body horror of being pregnant and trying to give birth when orifices are sealing up. My next one I read on ebook. This is Misery by Stephen King. I think this one is possibly the most famous one that's on my list, so you may well know it, but we have an author who is in a car crash and he is saved by Annie Wilkes. But it turns out that he is being held there captive by her rather than her being his rescuer, and she progressively, gruesomely maims him, and it's very difficult to watch, to read. That is probably my most classic body horror recommendation. And then my other one for that is Mary and the Rabbit Dream by Naomi Kistedaki. Not sure how you pronounce her name. But this one is about the kind of true story of an 18th century woman who was believed to be giving birth to rabbits. And it became a bit of a medical marvel, and these 18th century doctors got involved. I mean, pretty obviously she was not really giving birth to rabbits. It was a method of getting away with a crime that was committed, but they committed to the bit. And what happens to this poor woman, Mary Toft, in this fictionalisation is awful. And how do you try and prove that someone is giving birth to rabbits? Show them giving birth to rabbit bits. And it's horrifying, especially as a woman. It is absolutely horrifying. But I really enjoyed this nonetheless. This is a really great book. Okay, my next prompt is, if you like the theme of questioning what makes a monster, I think the absolute classic Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Who is the monster? Dr. Frankenstein or his creation? I mean, need I say more? Everyone knows what Frankenstein is about, and if you don't know, you can now go and watch the film or TV series. I'm not quite sure what it is. Although again, that's controversial in itself. But yes, in this, thematically, we are questioning which of these two are the monster. Is a monster a man-made thing, or is it something that is inherently evil? And then finally, just to mention one that's on my TBR, although I have actually started to read it now, is Murderland by Caroline Fraser. This is a non-fiction book, and this one is looking at the rise of serial killing in the Pacific Northwest and the possible environmental factors that contributed to that rise during the specific years in which we've seen such prolific serial killing in the US. Obviously, I can't tell you too much about that one because I have not read it, but it is the one non-fiction one that I'm putting on this list, and possibly the one that is closest to this story of Ed Gein and the series that Ryan Murphy has put out on Netflix. So I really hope you enjoyed all of those recommendations. Let me know if you've read any of these or if you have any other recommendations for my prompts. Thank you.